In 1903, a group of workers digging a drainage ditch in Somerset, England, pulled a human skeleton out of the ground. It was 10,000 years old, nearly complete. And when scientists finally sequenced its DNA in 2018, they found something that stopped the entire field of anthropology in its tracks. This man, Britain's oldest known resident, now called Cheddar Man, had dark brown to black skin and bright blue eyes. The combination looked so strange to modern scientists that they checked the results twice. But the DNA was unambiguous. The first people of Britain didn't look anything like the British people of today. Which raises a massive question that completely fractures modern debates. How did human skin go from universally dark to the massive spectrum we see today? And why did it happen at all? The answer doesn't start with race or geography. It starts with a microscopic shield. Melanin is a pigment produced in the deepest layer of your skin. Think of it as billions of tiny umbrellas absorbing deadly ultraviolet radiation before it can penetrate deeper and mutate your DNA. The more melanin you have, the more protected you are. But here's the paradox. In most mammals, fur does this job. And because of that, the skin underneath a chimp's or a bear's fur is actually quite pale. It doesn't need melanin because the fur is already blocking the sun. But humans lost their fur, and the reason is directly tied to how we hunted. Around 2 million years ago, Homo erectus developed persistence hunting, chasing prey not through explosive speed, but through pure, brutal endurance, running for hours under the direct, boiling African sun. But thick fur, excellent at keeping heat in, becomes a literal death trap when you need to cool down. Hominins with thinner fur could sweat more efficiently and hunt longer. The ones with thick fur overheated, collapsed, and lost the evolutionary lottery. We actually made a full breakdown on how losing our fur changed human anatomy forever. Let us know in the comments if you want that video next. But what matters here is what happened the exact moment the fur was completely gone. Skin was now directly exposed to the brutal equatorial sun for the first time. Without fur, melanin was the only barrier left between life and death. So natural selection pushed hard in one single direction. Melanocytes went into overdrive, making skin darker and darker. By the time modern Homo sapiens emerged 300,000 years ago, every single one of your ancestors had dark, melanin-rich skin. Not some of them, all of them. Dark skin was the universal default. But melanin has a secret double-edged sword, and it's a genetic mechanism that completely flips what you think you know about geography. Before we reveal how this molecule caused a massive survival crisis, drop a comment below right now. What country or state are you watching from? Seriously, take 3 seconds to comment your location, because the migration patterns we're about to show might link directly to your screen. All right, back to the crisis. UV radiation doesn't just damage DNA. It also triggers a vital chemical reaction that creates vitamin D. This is the hormone that regulates bone strength, immune function, and reproductive health. In Africa, the sun was so intense that dark skin still let in enough UV to make plenty of it. But around 60,000 years ago, groups began moving north into Europe and Asia. And this is where the pure physics of the planet became an invisible killer. At high latitudes, the sun sits incredibly low on the horizon. Its rays travel through far more thick atmosphere, filtering out 90% of the UVB light. Dark skin already blocks 90% of UV light by default. In Africa, that left a perfect 10% for vitamin D production. But in Northern Europe, where the sun is already weak, dark skin let through barely 1%. That's a catastrophic biological deficit, and the body collapsed instantly. Bones stayed soft. Skeletons developed warped and deformed. This wasn't just a minor health issue. It became a brutal evolutionary filter. Women with dark skin in the far north couldn't develop normal pelvises, causing them to die horribly during childbirth. Their dark skin genes died with them. But women born with slightly less melanin, just a fraction lighter, could absorb enough UV to survive childbirth and pass their genes down. Generation after generation, the filter ground down the population. Lighter skin survived, darker skin vanished. Right? Wrong. The math makes absolutely no sense. If this filter was running non-stop, dark skin should have completely vanished from Europe in a few centuries. But Cheddarman proved that 10,000 years ago, Europeans were still dark-skinned. For 35,000 years in the cold, their skin barely changed. Why? The answer is a literal dietary cheat code. Hunter-gatherers were eating a massive amount of fish, animal liver, and eggs, all naturally exploding with vitamin D. Their diet was entirely compensating for the lack of sun. Melanin didn't need to mutate because dinner was doing the heavy lifting. Then, 10,000 years ago, agriculture arrived, and it shattered everything overnight. Farming spread out of the Near East, and the dietary safety net vanished. Early European farmers stopped eating fish and game. They swapped it for wheat, barley, and grain-based porridge. Why the sudden shift? Because farming locked humans into grueling seasonal cycles. They couldn't afford to send hunting parties away for days anymore. And grain contains absolutely zero vitamin D. The backup system that kept dark-skinned humans alive in the north for millennia was completely gone. Now, the selection pressure became acute. It was adapt immediately or face extinction. The only women surviving were the ones with a drastic drop in melanin production. Less melanin meant more UV entry. More UV meant correct bone development. Every surviving daughter inherited this reduced melanin blueprint from her mother. The skin wasn't changing by chance. It was changing by survival. But this process still needed a massive catalyst to sweep an entire continent. And then it appeared. A random copying error deep inside a gene called SLC24A5. One single letter changed out of 3 billion in the human genome. This tiny mutation instantly slashed melanin production by 30 to 40%. One person, somewhere in the Middle East, was born noticeably pale. Within just 4,000 years, that single mutation swept through European farmers entirely. Not because of beauty or preference, but because the people without it literally couldn't reproduce. But here is the ultimate twist that completely blows modern racial theories out of the water. That exact mutation, SLC24A5, is completely missing in East Asian populations. Yet East Asians also developed pale skin at northern latitudes. How? They did it through entirely separate mutations in completely different genes. Different molecular pathways, identical biological results. Biologists call this convergent evolution. It's the same process that gave dolphins and sharks similar body shapes, despite being completely unrelated animals. The environment poses a fatal crisis, and evolution independently finds the exact same fix twice. Which means pale skin isn't a single lineage event. It's a desperate survival equation that the human body invented multiple times. Low UV plus a grain diet equals a vitamin crisis that forced a genetic rewrite. So let's have a real debate in the comments below. Knowing that skin color changed entirely based on what your ancestors ate, does this completely change how you view modern concepts of human race? Hit subscribe, argue your points respectfully below, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.